Good day and welcome to this webinar, which is from myself, Blaylock. I work for RE Today as a religious education advisor, but I've been doing some work for prayer spaces in schools. And this webinar, which will last for about 30 minutes, introduces you to the fruits of that work we've created. And these are all available for free and ready for you to use. Our resources for 4 lessons for children aged 7 to 11 in English Key Stage 2, which explore prayer. Prayer spaces in schools create extraordinary opportunities for children and young people to think about prayer and consider spirituality in open-minded and experiential ways. But actually, we found that some schools who've experienced a prayer space have wanted to do some wraparound religious education lessons to go with those. And prayer spaces in schools invited me to create 4 lessons that would be suitable for that. I hope you'll enjoy this quick mini tour of what we've created, and I hope you'll be able to use them, whether you are in fact yourself a school visitor who's a Christian who runs a prayer space in schools, or perhaps you're a teacher of religious education. From any perspective, these are broad-minded, open-hearted lessons. The whole scheme is summarised on this slide, and it tells you in the first column, the blue column, that we wanted to do some state-of-the-art RE, RVE in Wales, RME in Scotland for pupils aged 7 to 11. There's a parallel project for older students, but these ones are all about 7 to 11-year-olds. And I wanted to build these lessons so that they could be delivered from school RE or from volunteers to schools, school visitors who are Christians who've maybe set up and run a prayer space. They're integrated with common themes, units of work, and the Understanding Christianity resources that about 7,500 schools across the UK use. They're not mini lectures or anything like that. Instead, they're intended to be imaginative. They look at research, they explore biblical text, they encourage people to ask big questions, and they're all completely ready to go. The resources, paper-based resources to print, PowerPoint resources to put on your screen, on your whiteboard, they're all here and they're all done. And the scope of the lessons is that they explore concepts about prayer. There's a focus on Christianity, of course, but multi-faith prayer is often a topic in school religious education lessons. And these will fit very well with those kind of approaches. They build upon the prayer space in schools as an experience that pupils may have had, may have enjoyed, may have learned something from, and bring a bit of learning structure to what might have gone on in the prayer spaces. One lesson, the first one is introductory. Pupils will do well if they study that lesson before they go on their prayer space visit, and then the others, lessons 2, 3 and 4, are follow-ups to that. I really hope that if you use the lessons, you'll find them as I've intended them to be, engaging and creative and absorbing for the pupils. The themes of the 4 lessons are these. First one, what is prayer? The biggest of big questions in this topic field. The second lesson looks at how children and young people experience spirituality for themselves. And the third lesson picks up the text of the prayer that Christ taught his followers, the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, and looks for connections into young people's lives. The fourth lesson is research focused, more of a social studies set of approaches in that lesson, and explores some recent research into the practice of prayer in ways that 7 to 11s will be able to make sense of. Each of the 4 lessons has got some common features to it. Every lesson has an intention to be open to all pupils from any background. So if you have children in your classes who are Muslim or agnostic, atheist or Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Sikh or Buddhist, then these lessons are suitable for them. Every pupil brings their own personal perspective and experience to their religious education lessons, and we hope to connect with what every pupil thinks and has to say about prayer. There's loads of different learning activities here. Very few of those are kind of fill in the blanks sheets for teachers to give out and pupils to get on with. They're not lectures. Instead, there's a range of interactive, discursive, creative tasks for children. Prayer Spaces in Schools is, of course, a Christian charity, and it intends not to preach, but to open up a space, as it's all in the name. So this is discussion and deep thinking for every pupil. It's supposed to be some lessons with a bit of vision to them. And each lesson has a section that is something to do with the scriptures, especially what Jesus taught, to encourage children to think theologically about sources of Christian wisdom and inspiration. There is some sort of written activity in each lesson, and you could use that, but you don't have to assess or record pupils' achievements. The four lessons to use, I've asked three questions here: who and how and why. And my answers to those are, first of all, that the who answer, that could be anybody. If you are someone who's set up a prayer space in a school, you could teach these lessons. If you are a teacher of religious education, religious and moral education, religion, values and ethics, you could teach these lessons, or it could be done as a partnership. There's flexibility in here. And I just noticed there my experience of working with Christian visitors to schools, which runs to many thousands of these generous volunteers, these people who make such a fine contribution to RE across the nation. My experience there says plan it with the teacher, and actually co-teaching there is important and good. And most schemes of religious and moral education, values, ethics, RE, those have topics like Christian belief and practice, belief about God, spirituality, self-expression. All of those topics are places where one or more of these lessons would fit well. Do take the advice that says the first lesson is for children who haven't been to a prayer space yet, and it sort of introduces them to what might happen and how they might approach that. And then lessons 2, 3, and 4 draw the learning out. Those are follow-on lessons. And I've built in some aims and some learning outcomes to these. That's a bit of the why of we might be using these lessons to enable pupils to reflect profoundly, to deepen their knowledge and understanding, their learning about spirituality or belief, and particularly about Christian practice, the Christian practices of prayer. So in RE lessons, it's good to study prayer spaces. And that might be true for several different reasons. One, because teachers are often pretty surprised and pleased by the impacts of prayer spaces. You know, you're a teacher and you see people coming in and setting up little spiritual stations in a room with a few fairy lights, and you think, oh, my kids are a bit rowdy. I don't think they'll settle down to this. But ever so often, the experience is that teachers are amazed by the engagement that pupils have with the quietness, the reflective space making, the open learning approaches that invite children to participate in prayer, broadly understood, prayer as they may understand it, prayer, reflection, meditation. Yeah, prayer as it's most widely defined and described. And the lessons are here to make a richer learning experience for every pupil. I wanted to give examples from the 4 free lessons, all free, all available from the Prayer Spaces in Schools website. You can download the entirety of the resources that you need there. I'll just emphasize by saying that over again. So in the next part of the webinar, I'm going to give examples of some of the resources and approaches and activities that I've created in this project. I have to tell you, it's been a real pleasure to do this work and to be able to concentrate some of, well, what is for me actually many years of long thinking about the place of prayer in religious education and in pupils' lives and understandings. Of course, I do want to say here, we'll show some particular examples, but all prayer spaces in every school are different. So wherever a team come in and set up this lovely experiential focus on reflection and prayer, wherever they do that, then different activities are in use. If you were to look at the Prayer Spaces in Schools website, if you're unfamiliar, then you might be overwhelmed by the sheer creative energy, the imaginative impact of so many different activities. And some of those will feature in a prayer space that comes to any school. We use this slide to introduce what is a prayer space to pupils. And it's a bit of a mind blower in some ways because that's 2 classrooms there, you see. And one of them's got a rubber raft and a paddling pool and some sand trays and a great big wave of sticky notes all across the wall there. And the other one's got a garden gazebo and a massive photograph of a deserted, beautiful beach in the tropical island, rainbow-coloured umbrella. What's it going to be like? And we want this first lesson to say to pupils, well, you'll be going into a classroom, you'll be going in as a group, maybe there'll be 30 of you, you'll get a bit of introduction and explanation of what the prayer space consists of, and then you'll be kind of let loose into the spiritual space with a view to you doing some deep thinking, some reflection, some prayer. If the prayer space is inside, then often, oh my goodness, these volunteers, they're so creative. They can do amazing things with what looks like an ordinary classroom space. But they're coloured lights, calm music, tables and tents and teepees and mats and cushions and chairs, and actually an initial little presentation from the prayer space volunteers to tell children what's going on here, what can you do, where could you start, how will it unfold, what might you expect. That's an important introductory lesson, really, because it says to children and young people, this is a little gift, okay? We really try in prayer spaces to emphasise that the experience is inclusive. Prayer spaces in schools activities are designed not to be just suitable for Christian children. They're designed to be suitable for all children. And that says to pupils, don't come at this and think you've got to be religious. You can actually do something human and humane in the prayer space. I love the wide range of photographs that prayer spaces in schools have provided me to set up these lessons. And I don't know what you think, but just looking across there at the pipe clean figures and the world map and the light to hand globe there, it's just intriguing, aren't they? How will pupils understand the concept of prayer better as a result of engaging with some of these space making activities? The presentation includes the lesson that I've set includes this activities. It gives pupils two photos to look at. You can only see one there. The other one will be along in a minute, okay? And the photos are usually they start with a child, and then the child might be in some sort of prayerful position. And we ask, imagine if you can, what this child looking at this photograph might pray about, might say in a prayer. That's a distancing and grounding device. It doesn't say to the child, would you write your own prayer? We don't do that, actually. That could be a little coercive in some circumstances. But in this case, in this example, we say, imagine the girl has gone to the wedding. What do you think she might pray? And that invites people to identify with empathy and thoughtfulness with a Christian scenario, Christian wedding in the picture there. We've done a few of these. This one comes next, okay? What do you think this boy might be praying in regard to the baby in the special care unit? What do you think? And actually, what we found with this activity is that children are quick to empathise, quick to imaginatively engage with one or more of these different scenarios. There's the third one, you see, a situation of devastation after an earthquake. Write the prayer you think the boy might be praying. We invite our pupils to engage with this because we know from research that the topics of love, the topic of suffering, the topic of natural disasters, those are topics that children think keenly and spiritually about, and inviting them to create prayers on the basis of that is, it seems to me, a very suitable religious educational activity. Do notice that it could be a sensitive activity as well, and it does sometimes happen that a child in a prayer space is emotionally overwhelmed. Perhaps they cry, perhaps they weep. That happens in classrooms too sometimes, doesn't it? And those are not always bad tears. They are sometimes a signal that the child needs some comfort and needs the community of the school to come to their help. There's a fourth one of those, okay? Look at the girl and write the prayer that you think she might be praying about this photograph here. A photograph of a spoiled landscape ruined by the polluting wastefulness of humanity. You could do loads more, couldn't you? Pick some more pictures if you like, and invite children to imagine what might a person pray about this scenario, this situation. It's an illustration of the kind of lessons that we've set. Not can you remember the words of the Lord's Prayer? Can you tell me which chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel it's written in? But instead something with a more imaginative, creative, empathic and thoughtful focus for every child. We use this slide to encourage pupils to sort of get used to, mentally tune in to what's going to be happening. And we suggest when you go to a prayer space, expect something different, be open-minded, recognise that you're there with a free attitude, be imaginative and don't worry. And then I have this mantra, this gospel text, if you will, talk, 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 but silence, silence, silence matters as well. And actually, in the RE lesson, often pupils have a lot to say about their experience of the prayer space before and afterwards. Questions, experiences, stuff to share. Talk, talk, talk. But actually, the experience of silence is one that our children in our culture have too little. And I would like it if their experience in prayer spaces included the opportunity to use a little silence for some deeper reflection. We find that does often happen. It's one of the great gifts that prayer spaces give to children aged 7 to 11 in school. Would it be true for you, for all of us, that we need a bit more calm and quietness? Talk, talk, talk. Great. Silence, silence, silence as well. The second lesson in the sequence is about spirituality. And that's a difficult concept, isn't it? Well, yes and no. It's as difficult as the concept of music, I think. You ask two people, what does music mean? You get two different answers. Ask two people the meaning of the word spirituality, you get two different answers. But actually, the question, can any person connect to their spiritual side, is a suitable one to pose in relation to prayer spaces. We have used Dr. Rebecca Nye's description of spirituality as being about how you relate to yourself, to others, to the earth, and to the big beyond, or to the transcendent, or to God. And the second lesson introduces that. It's kind of simple and then it's kind of complex, but it's not harder than the concepts of science or the concepts of history that we use with pupils. So teach children what spirituality means. As I say, we do it like this. We say it's about relationships, relating to yourself, relating to others, relating to the earth, relating to the big beyond. Some say God. And that model of spirituality from Dr. Rebecca Nye suggests that a person's spiritual life might have different dimensions to it. Some of those might be stronger for one person than from another, or they might change over time. In fact, Dr. Nye says your spirituality is as unique as your thumbprint. I think that's a good idea. She talks about the spiritual signature of every individual. So we teach children what we think of not as a Christian model of spirituality, but I've called it a human and humane model of spirituality that anybody, atheist or agnostic, from any religion, might find helpful. That's really useful in schools. But how do you teach that to children? How do you teach that to 8 or 9-year-olds? Well, we actually begin by just asking pupils to reflect in lesson 2 on their experience of the prayer space. What did you like and dislike? And we then use the language of spirituality to open that up for pupils and invite them to say, somebody's going along tomorrow. What do you think you would say to them? What advice would you give them to make the most of the half hour or 45 minutes that they spend in a prayer space? And that concept of spirituality as relationship to self, to others, to the earth, and to the big beyond or the ultimate, that concept, I've tried to break it down and make it simple. So one way I do that is to say to pupils, it's in, it's out, it's up, and it's down. It's how you relate all around. And I can do that by just using the forearm gestures here. In, out, down, up. I thought I'd turn that into a little chant. You can get pupils to do in, out, down, up 10 times over and see if they can do that quickly. That's quite fun. But then I made it into this chant. I wonder if you'll get your pupils to chant like this. I don't know if I can do this. Let's try. Spiritual, it's a big word, but the meaning is clear. 4 ways to relate to everything that's dear. In life matters, put your hands on your chest. Outward from yourself, loving others is the best. Down for the ground we live upon, care for the earth. Up is a sign of what's above us, things of greatest worth. I reckon you'll be able to do it better than that. But actually teaching pupils the model of spirituality, as I say, is no harder than some of the big concepts that we teach in subjects like geography or English or science. So teach kids, what do we mean by the spiritual? You might get them to reflect on their experience in this lesson as the lesson outline comes in a PowerPoint. It's got diagrams with it, print-offs. Children can make these. Pupils might think about this. Did you consider anything while you're in the spare space that is about your own sense of self? Did you consider something to do with other people, about being kind or forgiving or generous? Did you consider something to do with our environment, with our beautiful earth? And did you consider something about the nature of God, the ultimate questions, the big beyond, the transcendent? We have this activity, which we love, for pupils to do in a little group of 3. Take a big question mark and just imagine if you could ask the person who knows everything, if you could interview God, what would you write as your questions to get you started? And we just ask pupils to write those into the big question mark. And can they come up with in a few minutes, 10 or 20 or 30 questions? If they do that, and you get one group of 3 to swap their question mark with another group of 3, and then second group take a look at the questions on their question mark and highlight which are the best ones. And can you suggest what you think the answer might be if you could ask God? What would the person who knows everything reply? Here, have a look at some that were asked by pupils in an English classroom in year 5. Do you think that everyone should believe in something? Why are people all different in their looks? I would ask God if he wanted to have a sleepover and play PlayStation with me and go Nando's and have a water fight. God, why did you create sharks? They eat people. And why did you create the world this way? And as we all have belly buttons, are you a woman? And how many things did you create in the 7 days? What great questions. And actually, this activity never ceases to be revealing of what's going on in pupils' minds, and it relates directly to the Christian concept of prayer, actually related back through the Jewish Bible to the Psalms, in which asking questions of God is not only a legitimate spiritual activity, but sometimes a completely necessary one. I wonder if those activities that go in lesson 2 come up to a good finale through the use of these two pieces of 10-year-old artwork. Zach, age 11, drew this picture, age 10, drew this picture with God asking, stating, I am the one, I am the answer to all of your questions. And I like Zach's picture because although he's done God on a cloud with a beard, it's not quite the stereotype, is it? I like the question mark on God's t-shirt there. Zach says, I know God's not really like an old man on a cloud, but God is the person who knows all the answers. If he's real. If there's a full stop there, if there were a full stop after answer, that'd be different, wouldn't it? The other painting is by Hannah and Olivia. They're both 11 years old, and they say, look at ours. God is in prayer. It's a spiritual painting because the colours stand for all the good things the person is praying for. And they show that God loves everyone just as much as everyone else. We set an activity in which pupils look at the artworks about prayer created by other 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and we ask pupils perhaps to create one of their own. Lesson 2 offers those kind of opportunities to pupils to explore their own sense-making of the word spiritual. Lesson 3 uses the Our Father, Lord's Prayer, the most famous, the most used, perhaps, prayer in global history. And it's not necessarily easy to understand. Some pupils are rather used to it in an archaic language form, but even in a more modern language form, making sense of the deeper meanings of each sentence and phrase in the prayer that Jesus taught us. That's quite a significant educational challenge. So that lesson, this is the end of it, works up to enabling pupils to think, if I could rewrite the Lord's Prayer for 6 or 7-year-olds, imagine 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds doing this, how would I do it? You see, if you can explain something to someone younger than yourself, that means you really understand it. So a simple version of the Lord's Prayer, I asked the children to do this, and these are from 10-year-olds, and they took a line and drew a picture to show what they thought it meant, and then wrote a little explanation of it. Give us this day our daily bread. For me, says the pupil, that means food on the table for all our family and all our community, so that people never starve, and we should all have food on the table. Don't lead us into temptation. Keep us free from evil. What does that mean? Well, this pupil interprets that particularly in terms of peace. It means we don't need weapons and bombs and bear traps. We need peace in our world. We need harmony to come. We need a world to be nicer when we pray against temptation and evil. Is that what it means? Part of it, I'm absolutely sure. Here's a third example. What is that last line? Not used in every version of the Our Father, but commonly used in liturgy. Yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. To me, says the pupil, this means that we should work together to care for each other without fighting. It's actually kindness that beats evil. And I've pictured a lion and a rabbit next to each other, taking care of each other to be a team. You see what's happening there, that the rigor of the work is asking pupils, can you make sense of every sentence of the Lord's Prayer? And the style with which, the flair with which the pupils respond to that shows them engaging and learning. We got classes to try this out, and some of them made displays of their understanding of the Lord's Prayer. There's one which could be done in a school where you're working. If you wanted to, you could create a wall display that shows the understanding of the Lord's Prayer. Here's another one from Wilby Primary School in Northamptonshire. I'm sorry, that's not close up enough for you to be able to read the explanations of it line by line, but a beautifully made display of butterflies and rainbows and the buildings of the local village. Could you do that? If you're the teacher or if you're the school visitor, create a visual display about the meaning of the Lord's Prayer. The last of our 4 lessons goes in a slightly different direction. It actually picks up the trend that religious educationists in the UK lately have been seeking to be a little bit more data aware, a little bit more aware of research, and sometimes to enable children to be investigators, researchers for themselves. So in this lesson, I've used research about prayer that is accessible to children. The lesson features 3 or 4 examples of research, but I'll only look at one of them with you now. One uses survey data of a survey of over 1,000 people asking, do you pray sometimes or often or weekly or daily, or maybe rarely or never? And interestingly, just over half said they prayed sometimes or often or regularly. How does prayer make you feel? The researchers asked them, and you could have a guess right now. Pause the tape if you want to. What do you think people would reply to that and say? How do you feel? That's an alphabetical listing of the most common responses. Some people said, when I pray, I feel challenged, close to God, guided, happy, hopeful, humble, joyful, love, peaceful, released, or strong. So then we asked children to work out which of those do you think would be the commonest reactions, the commonest feelings, the commonest emotions to follow the experience of prayer. And that might get the children to reflect on their experience of the prayer space, might it? Here's some answers coming up. Those feelings in alphabet order, but in the research, this is what 1,060 people said. 40% of them said, when I pray, I feel reassured or hopeful. 33% said, I feel peaceful or content. A quarter, nearly a quarter, said strengthened or unburdened or released. A fifth, 1 in 5, said praying makes me feel close to God. The numbers fall off a bit after that. But none of those emotions, none of those engagements, none of those feelings, responses are unimportant. And that's interesting research for those of us involved in prayer spaces, because it might say something of what we hope children, young people will get out of the experience of a prayer space in schools. All the time, every lesson, we've included some biblical material, and that's suitable because, of course, whether it's a syllabus in a school with a religious character, an Anglican or a Catholic school, or whether the syllabus comes from local authority or from a multi-academy trust or whatever source, then actually studying Christian scripture, the key teachings of the scriptures about prayer might be a part of what pupils are to learn. So I've picked there from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, his commentary on what prayer might do for you. Don't be anxious, but bring your requests to God in prayer. Give thanks, and then peace. Peace will keep your heart. So Paul says, if you pray instead of worrying, peace will come your way. Lots of Christians say that. It's in the research, isn't it? I ask the pupils, where do you turn to help you when you're worried, when you need some peace? Does praying work like that? Does prayer open pathways to peace for anybody? And ask pupils to relate that to their experience in the prayer space. Did you approach calmness? Did you find some peace? Did you find yourself being thankful? Did it mitigate your worries? The prayer space might give pupils fresh ideas about that. And that's one of the rather splendid things, I think, that comes from these installations in school. There's the typical resource that goes with that. You can pick that one, letters A to J, which give pupils some sentences to complete. I've called that a linger longer digging deeper sheet, and it invites pupils not to answer all of those, but just to choose 4. I actually get them to go through with a black felt tip pen and cross out the ones they don't want to answer. So a pupil might say, I'm going to do B, F, H and I. Prayer makes me feel an emotional response. Letter F, does God hear our prayers? I believe God does, or I believe God doesn't, or I believe we can't be sure. H, I think the prayer space in our school was used to think about topics such as they can reflect on what came up. And letter I, Paul suggests you can be less worried and more peaceful if you pray, giving pupils a chance to respond to that, positive or negative, uncertain or sure of themselves. Those are ways in which the resources from Prayer Spaces in Schools, I'll say one more time, all available free and online from the Prayer Spaces website. Those resources give you ready-to-use classroom recording sheets of that kind and style. So what have we got? Coming to the end of my webinar with you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this will encourage you to try using the lesson resources. You've got 4 flexible lesson plans, fully resourced and ready to go. And then you've got a set of learning methods. I hope you've seen that in the way that I've spoken about them over the last 25 minutes that are imaginative and encouraging the rich knowledge of pupils to develop, creatively engaging with Christian prayer. They fit well with lots of common RE topics that are taught to pupils in RVE or RME lessons across the ages of 7 to 11. Sometimes they're very philosophical. Does prayer work? Does anyone listen when we pray? Sometimes they're very theological. What did Jesus mean when he calls God our Father? Sometimes they're very spiritual in their focus, asking pupils, did this help you? Did this experience find you on a road to peace? They're all age appropriate, so the research material, the theological and philosophical ideas, they're all made to work for children who are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. If you want them, there's a writing activity with each lesson. They're tried and tested. We've run them all past classes of children, so we know they work. You don't have to use those. The lessons are flexible, but they're there if you would like them. I hope that taken all together, the 4 lessons are a model for good RE. And I hope that they show a broad-minded, open-hearted, inclusive way of approaching the topic of Christian prayer through the experience of the prayer space that might work for any child. Whoever you are, thank you so much for listening to this presentation. And I really hope that you and your pupils enjoy the learning that follows on from the lessons from prayer spaces in schools. Thanks very much indeed.